as we go to the start here of the Town Challenge Cup. We have Hollandia from the Netherlands on the left-hand side of your screen, Chinese national rowing team from China on the right. And this is one that everyone's been looking forward to seeing because it's going to be very hard to call. Certainly the Chinese, the informed crew, but can this national crew from the Netherlands cause an upset here, Matt?
Well, Hollandia are the holders of this event. It's only 3 years old, and away they go. Getting out of the blocks cleanly and straight in these coxless boats can be tricky, but we've seen the Chinese really being very efficient down the course in the last couple of rounds of this amazing event. Hugely high quality of competition here. Both crews off to a decent start. Hollandia a little bit too far to the left for my liking. You'd be worrying about the oars clipping those buoys. Umpire having a quick look to make sure they're not going to be in danger, and getting out of the island onto the straight. It's much easier now. You can see the wind has dropped from the flags down the course, so they should have a pretty smooth transition here.
Yeah, the Chinese doing a great job steering through that little bit of difficult stream that we often see past the island, so they've really handled this starting sequence well. The Dutch currently sitting about half a length up. The Chinese, of course, silver and bronze medalists respectively from the last 2 World Cups, so absolutely the informed crew, but the Dutch, such a pedigree in women's rowing and women's sweep rowing, particularly, certainly a crew that you'd never write off.
Well, it's interesting to see this, isn't it? We've not seen the Chinese fall under pressure in this regatta in this way yet, and the Dutch have really taken it to them. I guess given the form we've seen the Chinese pipped at the post in the last World Cup by the Danes, and so they are a crew that's feeling pretty confident, but they probably haven't been in this position at this point on the Henley track. They certainly haven't, so let's see whether they can hold their form under more pressure.
Absolutely, and this is a great insight into what's happening in international women's rowing at the moment. Of course, the women's 4 is back in the Olympic program for the Tokyo Olympic Games next year in 2020, and the event has really just been stepping on, so I'm sure there's a number of international crews watching this race with some interest ahead of World Cup 3 in Rotterdam next week. I know that the Australians will probably be watching. They're over in Gavarate in Italy preparing for that World Cup next week. Hey to the Aussies if you're watching us this afternoon, but here we have the Chinese currently being led by about a length by the Dutch women's 4.
Pretty essential for the Chinese at this point in the race to make sure that they're into a strong rhythm that they can sustain, but they've got to get their boat moving faster relative to the Dutch. And for my money, the Dutch crew's always looking quite fluid and silky and efficient, and that's to their advantage. The Chinese, a bit more mechanical, as we've been saying through the week, very powerful, very efficient, but you can see the umpire warning the Chinese, who are now steering right in the puddles, and that dirty water does not make it easy. It's not your advantage there, Sarah.
No, they have to be very careful here, the Chinese, because they want to avoid, of course, a clash of oars with the Dutch. We can see them starting to correct their steering now. You never want to be rowing in the dirty water of another crew, though.
No, and I think this is where, if you're in the Dutch women's 4, you capitalise on that, don't you? You've seen them having to correct the steering. That's going to slow the boat quite a bit, and you just want to stretch out and push on. Nothing too heroic here because they've already got a lead, but you want to capitalise on that now and really kill off any opportunity for the Chinese to compete. Meanwhile, in the Chinese boat, he's got to get a head straight. Let's recover from that. Let's get back into our normal form.
Yeah, and the Dutch, a very experienced outfit here. Ellen Hergewerf in the bow seat. She was in the Rio Women's 8. Of course, this crew, the European champions, they won World Cup 1, so we're looking at 2 World Cup medalists on screen here, but perhaps the Dutch, the favourites, I'm not too sure. Both crews have done so well. It was really always going to be an interesting contest, but the Chinese are really struggling with that steering as they steer back into the wash of the Dutch crew. Yeah,
it's been interesting, isn't it? Under pressure, they've struggled a little bit to maintain their form and also to maintain their course, and I think the Dutch have done a great job of putting the pressure on the Chinese 4 here, and it's going to be pretty hard to recover from that. So when you're sitting ahead like this, Sarah, what a feeling. Finals day at Henley, 2 or 3 lengths ahead now, and looking good.
They look really good, don't they? That's just really simple, strong rowing that we expect from the Dutch women. It always used to frustrate me how effortless the Dutch made it look, because they just, for a small country, they have such a history in rowing, in sweep rowing particularly. Their women, I know we had many tussles over the years in 4s and pairs and 8s, and this is a new generation of Dutch women coming through now, but
that just looked great. I'm just admiring the technique there. Really, really loose and fluid. It's almost as if they're doing not very much at all. All the work going on lower in the body with the legs and back driving through, shoulders really relaxed, and that gives you the control. You can see the Chinese struggling a bit with being down. They're now rowing in the wake of their opponents. They're having to contend with lumpier water here on the Henley stretch. And despite the experience they've had through this week of demolishing every other opponent, it looks like the Chinese are facing a defeat on this track. Under the new performance director they have, the chairman of the regatta, Sir Steve Redgrave. I mean, he's brought them over here and he's added to the international flavour of this year's Henley Regatta with the Chinese crew. It's fantastic to see them here, so many Chinese athletes joining those from 17 other nations here today. And as I was saying, we've seen the finals dominated by international crews at every level, in every event, which shows the attraction of rowing on this historic course in its 180th year.
Absolutely, as you say, a record number of entries at Henley, but a record number of international entries. And I think of all the finalists today, 65% are represented by international crews, which is quite extraordinary. And here we can see a race with two of those international crews, but the Dutch looking really good from above there.
If you want to know how to row a Cox's 4, man, women, girl, boy, this is the way to look at doing it. No disturbance, really smooth, just pushing the boat along and getting that return. What I love about the Cox's 4, you don't have a weight of a Cox to slow you down, so the run between strokes, which is a key part of the boat speed, is something that you can absolutely maximise. And it's wonderful to see the way these guys are propelling their boat as they come to the stewards' enclosure. They're going to be appreciated by the huge crowds we've got on finals day.
Yeah, they're doing a great job here, the Dutch. I mean, what I love is that there's no jerkiness and there's no overt aggression in what they're doing, and you can't afford to do that in a pair or a 4. They're boats that are so sensitive, that rely on run, and yes, of course, you need to be strong and fit and all of those things required to go fast, but above anything, you have to be sensitive to the boat and what it needs. And the boat is just, the 4 is the ultimate boat in terms of, I think, run and leverage, and it just should feel absolutely like silk. And that's how it looks here in this Dutch boat. It looks really unfussy what they're doing, and they're just really sympathetic to that boat and letting it run on each stroke.
Yeah, it's a wonderful display of Cox's 4s rowing by these women from Hollandia, coming into the final few strokes of the race in front of the grandstand. Applause all round for a great final, well rowed by the Dutch. The Chinese came here and they looked pretty invincible through the competition until they met these world-class opponents. They're going to meet again later in the season, and the Dutch women are about to cross the line as victors in the Town Challenge Cup. They're delighted at that. Look at that, congratulating each other.
Yeah, great row there by the Dutch. I had my money on the Chinese, so...
Yeah, they were asked a big question early on in the race, and I think they couldn't respond. And then when they found they couldn't respond, I don't think they had any other variety in their rowing. So a great race. Huge respect to Hollandia.
Town Challenge Cup, only the 3rd time this event has run. We saw the newly commissioned women's trophies last year. The Dutch coming back to take that trophy away from the Chinese. The Dutch really just stamping their dominance in this women's 4 event. We look forward to seeing them over the course of the rest of the season. Great to see so many Chinese crews here as well, underneath the leadership of Paul Thompson as their coach, and of course Sir Stephen Redgrave as their high performance director. But now we say thank you very much to Matt Britton for joining us, and I welcome Mark Hunter to the commentary box.